Welcome to the news, but happy. It's the news, but happy. 81% of Americans worried about recession in 2022. Survey. Americans eating out less, driving less, spending less, and canceling subscriptions. By Naveen Athrapouli, April 5th, 2022. A significant number of Americans are concerned about rising prices and worried about the country sinking into recession this year, according to a CNBC Momentive poll on financial literacy. 81% of adults, 91% of Republicans, 81% of independents, and 73% of Democrats expect recession to set in this year, according to the results of the poll published on April 5th. Respondents who were under more financial stress last year are more likely to expect a recession compared with those under less financial stress. With regard to inflation, 76% of adults say they're worried about being forced to rethink financial choices due to higher prices. Adults who claim to have a good or excellent financial literacy are slightly less worried about having to rethink choices when compared with those whose financial literacy is poor or fair. Seniors 65 plus are least concerned. 64% are worried higher prices will force them to rethink their financial choices versus adults 18 to 34 at 77% and 35 to 64 at 81%, the survey says. Quote, Republicans are more likely than Democrats to say they're worried higher prices will force them to rethink their financial choices, 85% versus 68%, end quote. The poll, which saw the participation of 3,953 adults, was conducted on March 23rd and 24th. Roughly half the adults said they think about rising prices all the time, while 44% say occasionally or sometimes. In terms of household income, 55% of those earning below $50,000 a year think of increasing prices all the time, as against 45% of those earning $50,000 to $100,000 and 40% of those making $100,000 or more. For 21% of respondents, gas prices were the biggest source of financial stress in 2021. This was followed by worries about housing costs at 16% and food costs at 13%. Republicans were more than twice as likely as Democrats to say gas prices were the biggest source of financial concern. 61% disapproved of how President Joe Biden is handling inflation, with 93% of Republicans holding such a view, compared with 71% of independents and 28% of Democrats. Higher prices are forcing Americans to scale down spending, with 53% claiming they have cut down on outdoor dining over the past 6 months. 39% drove their vehicles less. 35% canceled a subscription, and 32% switched from a branded product to a generic one. Politically, 18% of Democrats claim they haven't scaled down their spending in the last 6 months, as compared with 10% of Republicans. Declining consumer spending is bad news for the country as it accounts for over 2/3 of America's economic activity. Consumer spending rose marginally by just 0.2% in February, according to the U.S. Commerce Department. This coincides with the 7.9% spike in CPI inflation for the month, the highest level in 40 years. Though hourly wages increased by 5.6% in March when compared with 2021, the high rate of inflation basically erodes much of the incremental benefit. Households are choosing to save rather than spend their accumulated savings. The declining consumer spending triggered by high inflation will likely push the United States into a recession by next quarter, former Federal Reserve Governor Lawrence Lindsay said in an interview with CNBC. Quote, I'm very worried about having 1 to 1.5 monthly inflation prints. That's going to push consumer purchasing power down by about 2 points on top of the 2.5 points it has already declined since the beginning of 2021. You can't have a consumer absorb that much of a shock quickly without having a recession, Lindsay said. Thanks for stopping by. Remember to like and subscribe and come join us again for more news. It's the news, but happy.